Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmeelk. Great Giants Huddle podcast coming for you today. Jonathan Vilma will have the call on Fox Sports of Giants and Browns on Sunday. He also did Giants in Week 1. He will join us first. Then we're going to have Aaron Goldhammer from ESPN Cleveland giving us a little bit of an inside view of exactly what's going on at the micro level with the Cleveland Browns. All right, let's get right to it. Let's lead off with my interview with Jonathan Vilma. And now we welcome in our first guest. He's Jonathan Vilma, former NFL linebacker. And of course, he is the call of the game on Fox, 1 o'clock Sunday, Giants and Browns. All right, John, you had the Giants in Week 1. I'm sure you've watched the Week 2 game. Let's start on the positive side first. Where did you see the most progress from the Giants offense from Week 1, where frankly it was pretty much a disaster, to Week 2, where they did a lot better?
Yeah, Week 1, as you mentioned, it was rough. I'd say the two biggest things were getting the ball down the field, stretching defense. They didn't do that against the Vikings. They did that last week against the Commanders. And then Daniel Jones being more decisive with the football, with his decisions, and whether it was a right throw, not a right throw, just get the ball out of your hands, get it in play. I think those two things were much improved. You could see the difference that opened up the running game with Singletary, who, by the way, made some very great individual cuts, individual efforts. So I think that having the threat of stretching the defense, knowing that Daniel Jones is going to get the ball out quickly, opening up the run game, that helped out for them, and it should benefit them going on from Week 3 through the rest of the season.
Yeah, I want to follow up on a couple of those because I think you make some really good points. For Jones, you mentioned being decisive. I thought his comfort and balance in the pocket was much better. That allowed some better, more accurate throws down the field. Do you think that's a product of him just being more comfortable from his first game back after the knee injury last year? Footwork is something that they talked about, they worked on in practice in between Week 1 and Week 2. It just looked like he was far more comfortable in that pocket than he was in week number 1.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that. Glad you brought it up, John. He hadn't played football for what, 9 months, 8 months, 9 months, whatever it is, right? So it's just not expected, or it's unreasonable to think in his first game he was going to be as sharp as he was when he was in his heyday right before he got injured. So even if you're healthy physically, mentally you still got to catch up. And it takes a game or two or three sometimes to get that clock back up to speed mentally, and get the timing down, because practice is practice, right? It's a controlled environment. Once you get in the game, it's completely different, and you have to be able to process faster. So I think he definitely, I should say to the fans, should not overreact over Week 1. What you see in Week 2, I believe, is going to be more of what you're going to see from Daniel Jones moving forward.
And maybe this is a weird question, but do you think he almost has to get used to having better protection? You did better. I mean, you did Giant games last year. You know how poor the offensive line played. They gave up 85 sacks. It was a mess. It was not good. And it almost seemed like in Week 1, he was anticipating some of that pressure. Even when it wasn't there, he ran into a couple of sacks. Do you think as this offensive line continues to play a little bit better, he's going to gain confidence in that line, and that's going to make his mental processing back there a little bit better because he's not feeling as rushed?
Yeah, I would say that the first game was a bit of mental gymnastics. You got to give credit to Brian Flores, defensive coordinator. There were a lot of looks that you frankly couldn't tell, is he coming or is he not coming, right? And it looked the same. Sometimes they drop guys out. Sometimes they rush 6 guys. So I think that if there were, I couldn't pick a worse defense to go against in Week 1
You're
for
right.
Daniel Jones and a new offensive line, right? So I think that now, moving forward, you don't get that confusion, so to speak. And it's not that they were confused, it's that the defense is hard to decipher. And now you have an offensive line where, as you said, they're giving him time. And I don't think he has to get used to it. I think that he's going to be able to go through his progressions more. And then when he has that comfort, right? So when you have in Week 1, 8 guys on the line of scrimmage and it looks like a blitz, in your head, naturally, you're going to think, all right, if they do come, I got to get the ball out quickly. If they don't come, all right, well, I still have to figure out where is my read. Wasn't so much for week 2. So I think that both the offensive line and Daniel Jones, they were able to sit back and say, okay, it's a 4-man rush. We know who to protect. We know how to protect. Daniel Jones was comfortable knowing that they're going to get the guys, and then he had time to throw.
Yeah, in week 2, he got to that one backside deep out on going to the second read on the other side of the field. And
Yeah.
frankly, Jonathan, going back the last year or so, I don't remember the last time he even had a time in the pocket to make that type of long, deep field read, get to the backside, make a strong throw, step into it, not get hit after he made the throw. And I thought that play specifically against the Commanders was one that jumped out at me like, all right, wow, if they can figure this out, I see some pieces here that can make this work.
Yeah, 100% agree. And going back to your question about comfort, that is the example of comfort, right? He's back there, and he's able to go read 1, read 2, read 3, all the way to the backside, sit in and make a throw, right? So that is, and it's encouraging, frankly, right? I know that unfortunately the Giants are 0-2, but if I'm a fan, I'm watching the game. You want to see your team doing this, and unfortunately the wins may or may not come with it. But as long as your team is doing this, they will eventually get on a 3-game, 4-game, 5-game win streak if they're doing the right things.
You mentioned the deep shots. They didn't connect on those deep shots against Washington, but I want
Don't
to get
need
your
to.
perspective as a defensive player, though.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Casillas, so I know you're very close to. I do the pre and post game with him. He always talks about this. John, I don't care if they complete them. They just gotta take them. Take those shots. What does that do to a defense when you see the offense is willing to take those shots down the field?
Yeah. So what it does mentally first, mentally, it tells the safeties, it tells the corners, we got to back up, we got to stay honest, right? So you get a lot of safeties, a lot of corners. If you don't threaten them deep, they get flat-footed, they break up on all your routes. And that it's not just the passing game that it affects, it's the run game as well, because now your safeties, again, flat-footed, and they're ready to break up on the run. So if you never threaten the defense deep, you're going to have these safeties that they're lining up at 8. All of a sudden, they're filling the gaps at 3 yards, 4 yards, as opposed to I have to take 2 steps back just in case he throws a deep ball. And then now when they fill in for the run game, that's at 5, 6 yards, right? So that big difference is a first down, you get 5 yards. Second down, you get 5 yards. That's another first down, as opposed to safeties fill up. First down, 3 yards. Second down, 3 yards. Now you're facing a 3rd and short. So that's the importance mentally for having a deep ball. And then physically, you don't have to connect on all of them. You just got to connect on one, right? That's all. That's all you really need, right? You just need to have one 60-yard bomb, and all of a sudden everyone's like, whoa, 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 okay, all right, let's scratch that defense. Let's figure out what we're gonna do, et cetera, right? So the whole thing is always about, if you're going to take the shots, make sure they're calculated, and then try to connect on 30%, 40% of the shots you take. And as long as you're continuing to do that and stretch the defense, you're going to keep them honest, and it opens up the run game.
What do you think about Malik Neighbors? Part 1 of the question, part 2 of the question. What kind of impact, similar to the deep balls, I think in some ways, having a guy like that on your offense, how does that impact the defense and how they're game planning against you?
Yeah, Malik Neighbors, the best thing that I've seen about him, his best skill set is high pointing the ball, making those contested catches. And that is very important because you can now have confidence in a wide receiver versus man coverage, that you can throw the 50-50 ball and more than likely he will go up and get it. And that's always scary for a defense, for the cornerbacks, right? You can be in great coverage. All of a sudden he out jumps you. He gets the ball and it's a 20-yard completion. So I think that is an element that the Giants didn't have prior to Neighbors. Now that they have that element, I'm not saying defenses are going to, rejigger their scheme just yet, but you have the ability, or if you're Daniel Jones, the luxury of saying, okay, nothing's open. I know if I throw this ball to Neighbors, it's a high likelihood he's going to go up and get it. So I love that skill set about him. And again, this is a rookie we're talking about. He's having to figure out not only press man and the best corner going against him, but what coverages are throwing against him, adjusting his routes based on the coverage, being in sync with Daniel Jones. So there's a lot on his plate. There's a lot of expectation. I would temper those expectations and just continue to be happy with the process and watch him develop.
Yeah, and they'll need him against the press man that the Browns are going to play this week, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. We talk about the offensive line real quickly in pass protection. I thought the run game, they were really good. They saw a lot of soft boxes. They ran a lot of that duo stuff. And you mentioned Singletary. He turned a bunch of 6-yard runs into like 15-yard runs in that game, which is what you want out of a running back. What'd you think of the Giants running game after, again, we saw it in week 1. They were getting the light boxes versus the Vikings too. They couldn't take advantage of it, but they could in week 2.
Yeah, the first thing is, which is very important, Daniel Jones actually started running the football. And that keeps the defense honest when you now have the zone read. They're not anticipating Singletary getting the ball. And now you have Daniel Jones who can take it out the back end. So it goes back to keeping a defense honest. That defensive end or outside linebacker or safety, now they cannot fall back as quickly. And because they couldn't fall back as quickly, that's what opened up the holes for Singletary. And as you mentioned, he made that extra guy miss, that one guy miss and get the big gains. So it was encouraging to see that. What was also encouraging was to see that each offensive lineman at some point was able to handle their own one-on-one block. They didn't have to need the combo up, the chip combo up to a second level. And so that's also something that you can take the rest of the season, right? And so, and again, we should also mention the Commanders' D-line is not too bad. They're a pretty good defensive front.
Yeah.
So you look at this game coming up, Browns have a good defensive front as well. They obviously have Myles Garrett, but you know that the offensive line is capable of holding their one-on-one block, sustaining it. You know that Daniel Jones is capable of taking it out the back end on a zone read. It's not like he's going to score, but again, keeping the defense honest. And as long as you can hold up to those principles, it should be a good day for the Giants.
All right, now let's go to the not so good, the defensive side of the ball. And like I mentioned, I did the post-game show with Jonathan Casillas. I watched the game with him. As the Giants get gouged in the running game, he still takes it personally now. It drives him nuts as a linebacker. He hates seeing teams run the football. I'm sure you're the same exact way. When you watch the Giants run defense, frankly, the first 2 weeks, it wasn't very good against the Vikings or the Commanders. What's going wrong there, and how do they fix it?
What's going wrong? Tackling is what's going wrong. How do they fix it? You spend time in practice doing tackling drills. What we used to do with the Saints, we would, if we had a padded practice day, we would make sure that we stop the scout team's offensive players, stop his momentum. So what does that do? That forces you to wrap him up, run your feet, stop his momentum, and then let him keep running, right? Finish the play. And those little things helped out in the game because it was one programming us to now react accordingly. You tackle, you run your feet, you stop their momentum. The second was that it gets your angles down, right? So a lot of poor tackling comes from a poor angle. Sometimes, you don't wrap up, etc. But a lot of it is just that your timing is off. Your angles are off. And so in practice, we made an emphasis on doing that so we could be a good tackling team, because it's one thing if someone's going to miss a tackle, of course, that always happens. The problem comes where you have one player miss a tackle, then you have 2 or 3 other guys rallying, and then they took poor angles, and now they miss tackles as well. And they're just like arm tackling and stuff like that. So that's the biggest thing that I saw. Fortunately, it's very easy to correct. You just got to put an emphasis on it. And then you have guys that want to do it, right? Okereke, he's been a tackling machine for years. So we know that he's capable. McFadden, same thing, right? So defensive line, we know that they can do it. So I would say it's encouraging in the sense of it's not a fire sale where you have to revamp your whole scheme. It's just a matter of putting emphasis on tackling.
Now, in terms of the pass defense, I believe it's the first time in Giants history that they've allowed quarterbacks in the first 2 games of the year to complete, I think it's 78% of their passes or something like that. There's been a lot of easy throws. And they also give up some 3rd and longs against the Commanders. They give up 2 3rd and 13s on the same drive. I know the Giants play a zone-heavy scheme, Jonathan, But is there a way to, even if you're keeping things in front of you, to be more aggressive where you're not giving up so many of those easy passes and then frankly just getting your depth right to not allow some of those third and long conversions?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. So you can be more aggressive and not allow for completions up and down the field. I would say it's a little harder to kind of dissect it because I don't know what Shane Bowen is teaching them, right? So Shane Bowen may be telling them err on the conservative side. And so you don't want to double move. And if you don't want to double move, that means you're more than likely going to be late reacting to the throws, right? The pitch and catch. And so he could be saying that. He could also be saying, hey, look, I don't care what they do between the 20s, right? As long as when they get inside the 20, they don't score, which was great to see against the Commanders, right? 7 field goals, 0 for 6 for the Commanders' offense in the red zone. Those things, I don't know if it's schematic. I don't know if it's a philosophy thing with Shane Bowen. I would say the other part to it is the tackling, right? It goes back to that, right? So if you have a catch in front of you for 8 yards, well, don't let them fall forward for another 3. That's a
Right.
first down, right? If you have a catch in front of you for 6 yards, don't let them fall forward and make it third and short or second and short. So, a lot of those things can be corrected. And I mention it because that's what I saw on film. You get a guy, they wrap him up, but all of a sudden he's able to stretch forward, lean forward, wiggle out of a tackle, and you're saying, "Oh man, the defense is bad." No, the scheme was fine. They're where they're supposed to be. The issue is that they didn't execute the tackling portion of it, which is what's giving up the big plays.
Yeah, and that happened on a couple of those Jaden Daniels scrambles. So Isaiah Simmons missed a tackle on the right side. It happened a couple of
Right.
times over the course of that game. All right, let's talk about the matchup real quick here before we say goodbye, Jonathan. Browns leaned into a lot of extra offensive line stuff last week. 6 offensive linemen, 7 offensive linemen on the field sometimes. Are you almost having a flashback to your playing days when you started in the league? All these teams are running cover 2, and the answer a lot of teams seem to have now is like, all right, well, we're just going to pound you now. We're going to go big, and we're going to pound your 2 safeties deep and kind of attack you that way. Is that how you see more teams and how you saw the Browns kind of try to work their offense a little bit last week?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up. It's just funny how the NFL works, right?
It's
So
all a
the
cycle, dude.
NFL,
Everything comes back.
everything comes back, right? So everyone was with the big linemen, big backers, big safeties, stop the run, stop the run. All of a sudden, the offense said, fine, we'll spread you out, and we'll pass the game, and we'll use the passing game and be pass happy. And then now defenses, they've caught up to the passing game. Safeties are a little smaller, quicker. Frankly, some of them can play corner, right? Back in the day, they definitely could have played corner. Same thing with the corners, able to move, great speed. And so you have backers now that are smaller, they're really good in space. And so everyone has forgotten about how to fit up the run game. And so the offenses are now going back to it. And like you said, I saw it with the Pats game. I called the Pats game last week. They were going jumbo, right? Bringing in that big offensive tackle. And so what I see happening is the offenses are trying to give you personnel mismatches, and they're trying to do it in game and then keep you stuck in that personnel so that they can continue to run ground and pound until then you finally decide to go big, and then they open it back up on you. So I like the chess match that's going on. I do see it coming around the league a lot. I think that it's, again, natural. I don't even know what you call it, right? It's just the natural progression, I should say, for the NFL, for the offenses, where the defense is finally caught up to the passing game. Now let's go back to the running game.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New You moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Yeah, I think it's funny how everything does, in fact, always come back. How would you
Yeah.
attack this Browns defense? They are not a, kind of in vogue NFL defense where it's, 2 safeties deep, it's cover 2, it's cover 4, it's cover 6. They run a ton of man-to-man. They're going to get in your face and they're not going to allow any easy completion. So if you're the Giants, how do you attack this defense when you come out on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, if you're the Giants, any of these very aggressive press man teams, You attack them with their eyes, with misdirection, with slip screens. So if I'm neighbors and I'm the offense, I'm going to make sure I put him in motion. I'm going to make sure that he's the third man in a bunch formation. If I'm Singletary, I'm going to figure out ways to get him, again, those slip screens, some screens out the backfield, get some screens to neighbors, right? He's good with the ball. Wan'Dale Robinson, very good with the ball in his hands as well. And so what you're doing is you're trying to tire out the defense laterally. You just get them running laterally, get them running, keep them running. And then all of a sudden you take those timely shots over the top. And it doesn't always have to be a designed play. It could just be one where I said you're testing them, right? Keep those safeties honest. And if you can get the defensive line running laterally instead of running at your quarterback, you do that 4 or 5 times, sustained drives, you're going to find that the defense, like any other defense, they start to get tired. They don't get off blocks as quickly. And then that opens up the run game. So defenses like that, yeah, I'm a big fan of boots, rolling out. The zone read is going to be great, especially with Daniel Jones being able to run the football, and then the slip screens, and then trying to hit them over the top.
Great. All right. 2 more questions. I like to ask defensive players about great players on that side of the ball. Myles Garrett's a freak show, right? He's 270, moves like a guy that's 250. When you watch that guy, does he remind you of anyone that you played with or played against when you were in the league? Or
No.
and then what just makes him so awesome?
Yeah, Myles Garrett, he is one of one. He is rare, very, very rare. Talent-wise, generational talent. You already hit it on the head. He's 270. He moves like he's 250. He bends like he's a safety, a corner. Like it is ridiculous. I've never seen him more than like 3 feet off the ground. So he gets in that track stance. He never raises up. You get a lot of guys that get in the track stance, they fire off for like 2 steps, but then they raise up and they're 6'7" again, and all of a sudden offensive tackles can get them. He is not like that, man. He gets under everybody, can bend. I mean, it is, to be honest, I'm a fan watching him, right? And I know I have to be unbiased on Sunday, but I just love watching great players. He is a great player, great athlete, great motor. I mean, they always talk about outworking your opponent and all that stuff. There's nothing you can do against a guy who's more athletic than you and works just as hard as you, right? Like that, what are you gonna do, right? You need help. So watching him, that's what I see, right? He makes you pay. If you ever disrespect him by leaving him one-on-one with an offensive tackle for more than 3 seconds, he makes you pay. And that's what great players do.
Yeah, and it's basically the same thing with Dexter Lawrence, right? Like, you can't block that dude one-on-one. He's just bigger and more athletic than you.
Yeah, and you know what? I remember interviewing Dexter Lawrence last year when he really started to come on. And I remember asking him, because the years prior, he was really good, but he wasn't now, the best defensive tackle, if not one of the best. And it goes back to working hard. He said he kind of changed a couple things that he was doing in his preparation. He was changing the way he ate, what he was doing off the field as far as getting ready for games. And that was it, right? Because he was already super athletic, super talented. This guy's 350 pounds, runs with the best of them, as powerful as any defensive tackle I've seen. And then all of a sudden, he now has a work ethic behind it. Again, I just get to sit back and watch, right? And get to enjoy it. Feel bad for the offensive lineman, but he's a talent.
Yeah, no question. And the final question, you had a chess match with quarterbacks when you were a player as a middle linebacker, right? You would go back and forth and watch them. And this is probably a more complicated topic than we can cover here in our final 30 seconds. But what's going on with Deshaun Watson? Like, he was a great quarterback, man. Like, he led the league in passing yards, and now he just doesn't look like the same guy. When you watch him, what's going on with Deshaun Watson?
Right now, what I see is a quarterback that is still trying to figure it out with his wide receivers and his tight ends. It looks like it's not about being on the same page. It's about trust. And right now, he doesn't have the trust to just 1, 2, 3, throw it to a spot and trust that his man is going to get there. And I reference my days with Drew Brees. Him and Marcus Colston it was like Drew Brees could throw with his eyes closed to the spot. He knew Marcus Colston was going to get there, right? And it didn't matter what pressure was in his face. It didn't matter what coverage. He just trusted and knew it was going to happen. And so when you have that kind of trust, camaraderie with your skill guys, it just makes for a very smooth, efficient offense. And it's just not there yet. I don't know how long it'll take. It's a work in progress. He did play better in week 2.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing. And the more, I guess, time on task that they have together, they'll eventually gain that trust.
Jonathan, this was great. Have an awesome call with our guy, Kenny Albert in week number 3, Giants and Browns at 1:00. Thanks so much for the time, man. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, John. Take care.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
That's Jonathan Vilma. Great stuff out of him. And don't forget, the Giants Huddle podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. Now let's turn our attention to a closer look at the Cleveland Browns. Aaron Goldhammer does morning radio drive time in Cleveland for ESPN Radio Cleveland. Here's my conversation with him. All right, that's Jonathan Vilma. Now we welcome in Aaron Goldhammer, ESPN Cleveland Morning Drive, the really big show. Hammer time. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Oh, Schmeelk, we've got a couple teams here that both need a win. So I'm interested to see how this is going to go on Sunday, because I have a feeling it's not going to be as easy for the Browns as all the prognosticators in Vegas thinks.
Yeah, so we just talked to Jonathan Vilma, and I'll get to the Browns injury report in a second. But the last thing I asked him about was Deshaun Watson. I asked him, from your perspective, as a guy that had to game plan for quarterbacks your whole career as a linebacker, what's wrong with Deshaun Watson? And he said he does not see the trust in the receivers to throw with anticipation was a big thing he talked about. Obviously, you've been in the murk and the mud and the grime with this for a few years now. So I'll ask you the same question from your perspective. What's wrong with Deshaun Watson?
We debated all offseason, John, whether his problems were his shoulder, like physical, or above the shoulders, which means that something mentally is going on with him. And I agree with Vilma that I think it is a psychological problem. I think the guy has all the physical gifts that he had when he was dominating at Clemson and when he was kicking butt with the Houston Texans. But the problem is, I think that he does not have any trust and swagger in himself. I think a lot of that has been lost. And so here's what I think the Browns have realized going through week 1 against the Cowboys, when they got dominated, in week 2 when it was ugly and sloppy, but they played better against the Jaguars. They need to treat Deshaun Watson like he's a rookie. And I know that's wild for a guy who's making $230 million in a contract and is supposed to be a top 5 quarterback. They don't want to throw the ball 55 times a game. Okay. Does any of this sound familiar to Giants fans and what's going on with the Giants? They need to treat him like they don't have Patrick Mahomes back there. And so they need the lead. They need to run the ball. They came out and played as much jumbo formation in that Jacksonville game as I've ever seen in my life. They played 7 offensive linemen on like 25% of the snaps because they knew they were going to have trouble protecting and because they knew they had a deficiency at quarterback. And until Deshaun can slowly, brick by brick, rebuild himself into the quarterback that he was, I think there are 4 rookie quarterbacks starting on Sunday, okay, in the NFL. Jaden Daniels is one, Caleb Williams is one, Bo Nix in Denver, and Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. I think that's the way the Browns have to look at it.
Well, and not a bad week to run the ball, given the Giants gave up more than 200 yards last week to the Commanders. I expect it'll be a heavy dose. Before we get more into Brown stuff, Hammer, just so fans know, we're recording this at around 2:10 on Thursday, so injury stuff might change. I went to the Browns injury report yesterday. I counted approximately 2,000 players on the injury report. Which one of these guys should we take seriously as to who might not play? Because there's some big names on here, like Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Denzel Ward, Jedrick Wills, Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, DeJuan Jones, like Myles Garrett. There's a lot of guys, Martin Emerson, that are on this list. Who do you think is realistic and who's not?
You mentioned Miles twice, and you should mention him like 3 more times because he's the most important guy that's on that list, John. And I think he's going to play, but I think he's going to be a little limited. I don't think he's 100%. I think the foot injury is real. I think it played into the way and the number of snaps that he played in Jacksonville. And I think he'll play, but I don't know that he'll be out there on every play. I wouldn't expect that. Denzel Ward was on a pitch count last week also against Jacksonville. And I think the Browns have to approach this smartly. I mean, on the one hand, they know they don't want to take the Giants lightly, but on the other hand, they've got a couple winnable games here that aren't exactly against division opponents and aren't exactly in conference. So I think they'll be more careful with guys, not that they think the win against New York is automatic, but just if you're going to have Myles Garrett for the whole game, would you rather pick the Giant game or would you rather pick the Ravens or the Bengals? And they got to keep him healthy for 15 more weeks. The other thing I'll say about the injury situation is that the tackle right now, John, I don't know who the Browns left tackle is on Sunday, and I don't know who the Browns right tackle is on Sunday. Other than that, the tackle situation's in great shape. They hope to have Conklin, who's been an All-Pro before, back. Can he make it through the whole game? I don't know. Jedrick Wills is unlikely to play in this game, in my opinion. Again, you gave everybody the time, and things can change. He's the Browns starting left tackle, and I think he'll probably be out. So, it's going to be a little bit of a moving target here, figuring out who's going to be on opposite end of the Browns offensive line. And I'm sure you've been talking about this. I think Thibodeau and Burns are keys for the Giants here. They've got to show up and welcome to the season, guys. It's time to get some pressure on the quarterback because I think this is going to be an opportunity for them to have a big game against the Browns.
Which is why the Browns don't want to drop back and throw the ball over 30 times a game, as you talked about. Amari Cooper, really strangely unproductive in his first 2 games this year. Jerry Jeudy's been more so productive. I believe it's the last time Amari Cooper had less than 20 yards receiving in 2 straight games since the last 2 games he played for the Raiders before he got traded to the Cowboys. Is he unhappy, or is this just the deal where it just happens two weird games in a row and there are no issues there?
Well, I think that the unhappy thing plays into this because he didn't show up at the mandatory minicamp because he was unhappy with his contract. He's in the last year of his deal. And I think that if Brandon Ayuk wanted to come to the Cleveland Browns, that Amari Cooper would be a member of the San Francisco 49ers and Ayuk would be on Cleveland. But Ayuk, I don't know what he was thinking as he was navigating that whole charade for 6 weeks during training camp. So I think Amari is human, and I think all of this has affected him. I think the opportunity to go play for San Francisco for him actually would have been really cool. It's a Super Bowl contending team. The Browns are good, but they're probably a little bit less than that. And so I think this all has just been a whirlwind. They got some of the contract stuff figured out and give him a little bit more guaranteed money. But John, it's not just the lack of production. If you go back and watch, he has dropped a touchdown pass in each of the first 2 games. And so that is very un-Amari Cooper-like. He is one of the most sure-handed players in the NFL. So I would expect that this is just a little bump and that he'll play better as the season goes on. But I do think that the whole dynamic with him and the way the offseason went, I can't help but assume that that's playing into his production and the way he's played through the first 2 weeks.
All right, 2 quick questions on the defense. Jim Schwartz, wide 9, man-to-man defense, all that stuff. Have you seen the Browns double other teams' number 1 dynamic wide receivers, or do they just play their man-to-man and trust a guy like Denzel Ward to cover? Because I'm curious to see how teams start adjusting to the rather large target share Malik Neighbors had in week 2.
Yes, and I would expect that the Browns will try to take that away. Jim Schwartz is a Bill Belichick disciple. And what did Bill do whenever he played? Did Giants ever play any big games against Bill Belichick?
Couple.
They take away the thing that you do best. So I would expect that the Browns are going to do that. I also don't know, John, that you're going to see a ton of Ward on Neighbors because A, it's a size mismatch for the Giants. And B, it is, he's hampered with that injury that you brought up. So I think MJ Emerson is going to get the bulk of that assignment. And don't think that that's necessarily good news for the Giants, because I think that MJ is one of the best young corners in the NFL and can hold his own against Malik Neighbors. But I think the Browns are going to try to take the tact on defense that they're going to try to make somebody else beat them other than the stud rookie wide receiver who's getting 18 targets a game or whatever.
All right, just give me one thing or two things, Hammer, that people nationally haven't noticed or know about the Browns that locally you guys think is a much bigger deal that maybe someone like me might not be locked in on or focused about that Giant fans should be paying attention to on Sunday.
They have really good special teams. They have one of the best kickers and one of the best punters in the league. They won in part last week because their punter was so good. They won because their kicker has made his last 10 from 50 plus in Dustin Hopkins. So I'd look out definitely for that. And then I've been disappointed, John, in the Browns' non-Myles Garrett pass rush so far this year. And first of all, I think that he's going to be over Andrew Thomas for part of the game. And so I think that's a great matchup to watch. And I also think that, you brought up Za'Darius, Alex Wright, Obo Okoronkwo, some of the guys the Browns are paying big money on the inside, need to arrive for the season in the same way that Burns and Thibodeau do for the Giants. And I think that this game is going to be close. And my guess is that, what shows up here? Do Burns and Thibodeau show up, or do the Browns interior and opposite Myles Garrett pass rusher show up? I think that's a huge narrative in this game.
Hammer, enjoy the game, my man. I'll see you Sunday.
Thank you.
Great stuff from Goldhammer. Great stuff from Vilma. The Giants Huddle podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Giants. Citizens will donate $750 to the Giants Foundation for each scoring drive during the 2024 season. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. We thank our two guests. Really good information, more of a macro level, and the matchup stuff from Jonathan Vilma from Fox Sports. And again, they have the call on Fox this weekend. And then Aaron Goldhammer going inside the Cleveland Browns a little bit so Giant fans get a real feel for some of the important details of this matchup that could determine the winner on Sunday. Thanks for being with us in the Giants Huddle podcast, everybody. We'll see you next time.